look at what should be turned in by now and what is to be done this week. So let me put this up on the screen. Okay, looking at our foundations of programming, let's go to this grade screen. Remember, always check the grade screen to see what's due in September 11th. That's yesterday. You should have turned in the lesson 2 introduction to Python. So if you haven't turned in both of these first lessons, you're behind and need to get caught up on that right away. This week, we just have one item due, but next week we'll have 2, followed by our tests coming up the week after that. So don't get behind. Keep up with us here. So this week is lesson 3, printing strings. Printing strings. So let's look at that. Let's go back to the activities. Printing strings lesson. Okay, here we go. So printing strings. So for the purposes of this course, take everything you know about printing and chuck it out the window. We're not talking about putting ink to paper because, it's when we think of printing, we think of sending it to a printer. In this class, print just means display on the screen. That's what printing is for our purposes. When we tell Python to print, that means display it on the screen. It doesn't mean send it to paper. So we're going to demonstrate an understanding of the characteristics of strings, and we're going to write a program this lesson and identify and describe types of programming errors. So let's look at what all we have in this lesson. The print function is used anytime you want your program to display something. All right, so let's look at their activity right here. First thing it says is read the code and try to predict the output, and then run the program and look at the output. So look at this. We've got hashtag print example. Now, anytime you see hashtag in Python, that means comments. That tells Python, ignore this line. This has nothing to do with my program. Just skip this and go to the next line. So Python totally ignores anything. So that's what you put in there so other people that are looking at your program can understand what you're doing. That's where you add extra comments in there. So like this tells us that this program is a print example. It's an example of the print code here. So skipping that, since it's just a comment line, we look down. Now they've got DEF, main, parentheses, colon. This means define, right? We're defining the main loop, the main portion of our program. That's telling Python, okay, I'm going to define the main process I want you to do. So the next line says print, parentheses, quote. This is a print statement in Python, quote, parentheses. And then main down here. This is basically telling it to end. This is ending our main process. So we've defined the main, and then we end it by just typing main with the parentheses. That tells Python, okay, you're through with that. So when we run that, this is a print statement in Python. That's exactly what I told you. Define the main process we want you to do. Here it is. We want you to print. This is a print statement in Python and end. So that's what it did. Okay, so let's look at the next one here. So your turn. Under the first print statement, type another one that will display the message, I am printing. So if we go here and we say print, I wonder why I haven't put a space in there. Look at this. I am printing. And let's run our program. Error. Indentation error. That's because our print was not indented the same number of spaces. See, they have 4 spaces in front of the print, and I only put 2. So if I indent this over 2 more spaces, all right, now run. Okay, it didn't matter that I put an extra space between print and the parentheses. It's the fact that it's there. So I just wanted to test that. This is a print statement in Python, and then I am printing. Now, I want you to notice something with that indentation. If we indent it the same as the define statement up here, when we run it, it goes first because it's on the same indent. It looks at these indentations first. Then it goes over to the next set 4 spaces later. So this is actually not the output that we should have, right? There's an error in our programming because this should be printed second and it's printed first. So that means we need to go back and make sure this is indented to 4 spaces like the statement above it. Then when we run it, now it puts it in the proper order. So we had an error in there in the fact that we did not indent it the same. And this, like I said, we can take that out of there and it doesn't affect it. It runs the same. Okay, here's the next one. Read the code and try to predict the output. Hashtag print example. So that's just a comment. Define the main. Print. This is a print statement in Python. Print. I am printing. Print. Will this print? And end our main. Okay. So try to predict the output. Think it'll print all 3 of those? Let's run it and see. Parse error. There's bad input on line 6. It tells us that line 6 has a problem. Line 6 is our print. Will this print? Do you see the problem? One of the print statements has an error. Try to fix it. So since this is a string in here and we want to literally print the string that's in this parentheses, we have to put quotes around it, because otherwise it thinks, will this print question mark is some kind of variable or something, and there's no definition for that variable, so it doesn't know what to do with that. But if we put it in quotes, we make it a literal string, literally print this. Now when we hit run program, it'll put that, will this print? There it is on that 3rd line, just as we expect it to do. But we had a syntax error. We had an error that we had something wrong because we did not include the quotes. And so Python wasn't sure what to do with that. So we've just printed and debugged a program, right? We had to debug that. So let's move on to the 3rd page of our problem here. So a string, because we're talking about printing strings, it's a sequences of letters, numbers, spaces, or symbols, or an alphanumeric information, which alphanumeric is any combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. All right, so any combination of that. So a string could be a single letter, it could be a word or a phrase. Right? To make Python print your strings exactly as you wrote them, you got to put them in quotation marks. That was that error we just had. This is the string we want print. This will print, but we have to have the quotes around it to say literally print what's here. I mean, exactly character for character. So someone else wrote the code that created the Python program. So we just get to write this print function, and the Python code will convert that to computer language and let the computer be able to run that. Reminder, always be sure to type print followed by parentheses. And in there, you can put anything you want to quit, but if it's anything you want to print, but if it's a string literal, make sure you use the quotes. Literally print this. All right. So print, are we having fun yet? In quotes inside the parentheses. Let's look over here. Writing your first program. All right. So here's a video. I want you to watch this video. I'm not going to do it here on this. Watch this on your own when you go through this lesson, 48 seconds. And it talks about writing a program in here. And here's the steps to do that. So after you watch a video, click this idle button up here. Let it open up. It'll open up this window. And then follow these instructions. Add comments. Use your main function, indent and print, close the main function, run your program. So you'll do that in this window that opens up when you click that idle button. Okay, so that's where you practice. Do that. Page 5 talks about bugs. This talks about Grace Hopper was the first one who solved a bug in the program. And it was literally a bug. It was a moth that had crawled in the computer and was causing it to have an error and wouldn't run because a moth was actually blocking part of the computer inside there. And this was back when computers had like vacuum tubes and stuff. So a moth could really make something go wrong inside a computer in there. So they removed the unfortunate moth, taped it in their logbook, and said the first actual case of a bug being found. And so debugging became the phrase to use for fixing computer programs, even though it's not literally a bug most of the time now. So, but she was 1906 to 1992. She is credited with popularizing the term debugging and compiler. She created the first compiler. And she was known as Amazing Grace and was a U.S. Navy Rear Admiral, so high-ranking naval officer there. Most of our computers and everything developed with the military first and then came to the general public. So let's look at page 6, preventing programming problems. So there's 3 types of errors that we're going to talk about. Syntax errors. These are the easiest, most common. That's when you've broken a programming language rule, right? Like we had that syntax error when we didn't have the quotes. There's a syntax error. Like, in writing English, this sentence shouldn't have any errors. That has an error because shouldn't should have an apostrophe in there. See, note the errors in the spelling and the punctuation. And it didn't have a period at the end. So that's correct syntax for writing in English. For computers, this would not do anything. Python will be confused. You have to have the proper syntax there, the parentheses, the quotes. Runtime errors, these happen when you run the program. So you run it and it returns an error from running. It's a runtime error, meaning there's something it can't calculate. There's a value. The computer can't do this. There's nothing wrong with print 11 divided by 0. You don't need quotes around that because you're not literally wanting it to print 11/0. You want it to print what is 11 divided by 0, but you cannot divide by 0. So it comes back with an error because it doesn't know how to do that. It's not possible to divide 11 by 0. So if you correct that and say 11 by 17, it'll come back with that decimal answer on what 11 divided by 17 is. Logic errors are also called semantic errors, and they can be a little tougher. Logic errors mean the program ran and you got results, but they may not be the results you expect it to be. Something went wrong. Like we had the print that we had all the way back with no indentation, and it printed first before the other print. That's really a logic error. It didn't print the order we expected. It ran fine. There was no errors. It just didn't give us the results that we expected with that program. The syntax was fine. There's no error. You got to go back and follow the logic. Oh, well, there's what happened is we had the print without the 4 spaces in front of it. So here's some troubleshooting tips if you're stuck. Check your spelling and capitalization because Python does pay attention to that. Check your punctuation. Did you miss a quote, parentheses? Check your spacing. They have to be spaced properly. Look out for the indentations. Check before and after. Sometimes the error is hiding the line above or below. It told Python to look for something, and then the next line you gave it was not what it was looking for because of an error. And talk it out. Read the code out loud to yourself. It should sound like a really weird story, but once you say it out loud, your ears may catch what your mind keeps skipping. So let's look at page 7. The last thing we need to pay attention to is the post-mortem review. So professional programmers develop a strong habit for success early on, and that is the post-mortem review, or the PMR. So it's just a short written statement that evaluates how your project went. You reflect on what went well and how it could be improved. And so this allows programmers to share their lessons learned with other programmers, become more efficient and effective. So let's look at this example. Here's 4 questions that are answered in the PMR. What was the purpose of your program? The purpose of my program was to say happy birthday to my sister. It also gave me a chance to practice my Python skills. How could your program be useful in the real world? Well, I'm going to show it to my sister on her birthday, and it'll be like a birthday card that I programmed instead of buying one. What's a problem you ran into, and how did you fix it? I kept typing happy birthday without the quotation marks, and it would not work. When I realized I had the syntax wrong, I fixed it, and then it worked. And to describe one thing you would do differently the next time you write a program, I learned it's important to pace myself and pay attention to the details. When I got the syntax wrong, I learned what happens when I don't use quotation marks. Now I know I need to pay attention so I don't leave out important information. Okay, so with that, that's all the lesson. Let's look at the assignment, because the assignment is right here at the end of the lesson. Page 8. Complete the reading in the lesson. Practice using Python. That was on earlier pages. And now follow the assignment template. You open this, hit save and print at the bottom. And then here's the rubric. So let's look at the assignment. The assignment template right here. Okay, printing strings. This assignment has 2 parts. So part 1 is the programming. Now let me show you this save and print. When you click on the save and print, it's actually going to save it. It's going to open up a window here. It saved it to my computer. Since you have a Chromebook, you'll probably want to save it to your Google Docs. All right, so you would have that in your Google Doc. When you open it, it just puts it in a Google Doc, or mine does it in Word. It'll just put it on a page here where you can type. Like you're going to have all the directions that you have on how to do this. And then you're going to put your program code right here, right? You got this space here where you're going to copy the code that you wrote in Python in that idle window. You're going to copy it and put it all right here. So we can look at your code and see if you did everything correctly. And then after you do that, and here's the directions, by the way, use the idle to write your program using comments. Okay, you got to use the comments at the beginning. That's a hashtag. Type a heading that includes your name, today's date, and a short description. Right, whatever day you write this program, use that date and a short description. And then decide on the message you would like to display on the screen. So you could put your favorite poem, your favorite song, a few sentences sharing information about you, whatever you want to share. All right, this is just some suggestions, whatever. So after your comments, you're going to set up your define main statement with the parentheses and the colon. Don't forget the parentheses and the colon, right? And then use at least, I'm going to put that in bold. I'm going to underline that and put it in yellow, at least 5 print statements to display your message. All right, you can do more than 5. Just you have to, that's your minimum. And then conclude the program with the main statement again to end it. Follow the Python style conventions regarding indentations, right? You got to indent things inside the main. Run your program to ensure it's working properly and fix any errors that the interpreter or you may observe. All right, so after that, after you get your program running and you've fixed any errors, that's when you're going to take it and you're going to copy it right here. Here's my program, and put it all right there in your document. Then here's part 2, the post-mortem review. Complete this. Write thoughtful 2 or 3 sentence responses to all the questions. What was the purpose of your program? How could it be useful in the real world? What's a problem you ran into? How did you fix it? And maybe you did it right, and you can say, I did not have any problems. It was all correct the first time. But if you had any problems, this is where you document that. And then describe one thing you might do differently the next time that you write a program. So this is a big part of it also. So let's go back and look at the rubric. I want to look at the rubric because you want to need to know how you're graded. This is a 100-point assignment. All right, here's how you're graded on this assignment. The rubric, program design. This is worth up to 10 points. Like, you may only get 4, 7, 0, or 3. Work contains all required elements, which means includes your name, the date, and the comments explain the purpose of the program, and it's correctly indented. All right, so program design, that's worth 10 points. 40 points is the content. You've got the Python code saved, the main functions properly declared, and you have at least 5 print statements. You've got all the required elements of the program. 40 points. Then 30 points for the performance of the program. It contains all the required elements. It runs correctly with no errors and produces the expected results. So first, did you write it properly, and then does it run properly? And if it doesn't run properly, you'll get partial points, right? Partial points. And then the post-mortem review is worth 20 points. So if you get everything correct, I mean, you know all the required elements, you've answered all of the questions, and that looks good, then you'll get the full 20 points. Otherwise, you'll get partial points based on how much you've got included in there. So that is the rubric you're being graded on right here for this program. All right, so that is found at the end of that. If you just go to the assignment, let's go to the assignment right here. All you see here is where to submit it. So that's when you're going to click on this attachment button and choose the Google document where you save it at. After you fill in all that information, you'll save it in your Google Docs. And be sure and share that with me, because I'll end up having to email you and say, share this document, because it won't let me look at it until you share it with me. But you will choose the Google document and then submit it. Be sure you submit it after you choose your document. Submit your work. So that is what is due this week. You get to write a program and submit it. So get used to doing this. We'll have some more of this year. Writing the strings. And that's what's due, just lesson 3. So if you have not completed everything up 1 and 2, get that caught up. And then here is lesson 3 that is due this Sunday. So, all right. If you got any questions, come to class later in the week. 8A this Friday. So we'll be here Wednesday and Friday. We'll see you next time.